What's going on, guys? It's been a while since I recorded a video, so glad to be back. But the topic of this video, it's really the reason as to, or the big reason as to why I haven't been uploading for such a long time. And I really felt the need to make this video because people who are on a similar journey to me, like some of you are going to go through this experience, or you're currently going through this experience, and hopefully just by teaching you or telling you about my story and like the lessons I learned from it. Hopefully, you'll be able to get through it better than I have or faster. So, essentially, the thing that a lot of people don't tell you about when it comes to like becoming lean, it's very hard to bulk up after that point. Like, if you're like going through these cycles of, bulking and cutting because you're trying to just build more muscle, you're just going to have to go through these phases where you get kind of chubby and then you cut down and you look pretty lean and like shredded and good and whatnot. And the thing is, the around the time where I was recording like a bunch of videos about like how to build muscle and how to build an aesthetic physique and like all those things, that was a point where I was getting like the highest ROI in terms of like validation from other people. Like I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. And I hope in this video I don't come off as like bragging or anything like that, because honestly I don't give a shit about what you think about my achievements. I'm just trying to help those people out who are like going through a similar situation or are going to experience a similar thing. But basically, around that time when I was recording those videos, that was the time where I was getting a whole bunch of validation. Like I noticed it from the way that my friends treated me, the way that like people who I didn't even know were like on same college campus as me, and just in general, like the halo effect is real. When you're muscular and you're like lean and like it shows in your face and whatnot, people really do treat you differently, and the halo effect is real. And I had like built muscle before this, and I had like muscle, but I'd never been that muscular and that lean before. And yeah, I was getting a lot of validation. And the problem wasn't that, it was that when I came back to the realizations of okay, to reach my goal, because at that point I was around like 162 pounds, 10% body fat, or I guess I was like lean, 162 pounds and lean at that point. But my goal is to be 180 pounds in lean or around 10% body fat. That was my goal. And I knew that, okay, I can't stop here. I can't just like stay lean at this body weight forever, because if I do, I'm not going to be able to make progress and I'm not going to have like the dream physique that I want and essentially maximize my SMV, sexual market value, in terms of like my physique and whatnot. And I wish I didn't do this, but I gave some bad advice on YouTube in some of my early videos. I gave this idea that you can lean bulk. Essentially, it's this idea that you can stay really lean, like very lean, and still build a lot of muscle and weight and whatnot. Now that is true, I guess, for beginners, because newbie gains are real, and you make a lot of progress when, say, like if you haven't worked out at all, you're really skinny and you just like start doing some push-ups, and you can stay pretty lean and build a lot of muscle. But especially towards like the advanced stages, when you actually have to track your calories and be consistent about your workouts, it's just a myth. Like you can't really stay very lean. I mean, you can stay relatively lean, but unless you're taking like steroids or you have some superior genetics, it's just not going to happen. um you need to go through this bulking phase where you get at least a little bit chubby, and then from that point you end up like cutting down. But I wanted to convince myself like so badly that I could stay lean and like build a lot of muscle. But eventually after a while I realized, okay, this isn't the case, and I have to go through another like bulking stage. Now, the only reason it was really hard is because I was so caught up in that external validation of like noticing the way that people treated me, where when I started to like, okay, I'm just gonna like bulk up a little bit more. I'm not gonna, go crazy with it, but I'm just gonna like eat a little bit more calories so I can actually like start putting weight on the scale. I'd wake up, look in the mirror, and my face would be a little bit more puffy than usual, and I'd notice how people would treat me differently, or at least I would perceive that they'd be treating me differently, even around friends and whatnot. And I was like, it felt painful. Like, I'm not going to lie. It felt painful because I felt like I was losing something. And yeah, it hurt. I'm not afraid to admit that because, yeah, at least for me, I can raise my hand and say, like, I'm a pretty sensitive person when it comes to what I think people perceive about me. I think a lot of people try to put on this act like, oh yeah, I don't care what the fuck anybody thinks about me. I'm my own person, whatever. But like, unless you're a psychopath or something, or I don't know, you're just through a phase where you're trying to deny it. A lot of people deep down inside, they do care. They just try to act like they don't care because they're afraid of being hurt. It's that simple. At least that's what it is for me. But anyways, for a very long time, I stopped making videos and I didn't realize it or want to admit it at the time, but I felt a lot of an anxiety because I wanted to start bulking up. And eventually I ended up like started bulking up again because I was like, I can't do this anymore. But like I had a lot of anxiety. I stopped producing videos. I stopped being around my friends as often. I kind of like isolated myself and didn't want to be around people because I felt like, damn, now that I'm like on a bulk again and I'm being chubby, losing a lot of that external validation, I felt very sensitive to it. Even though like objectively, like I was still buff and generally I still looked okay. It was just like that night and day difference, that contrast that I was like very consciously aware of. What I really think people should know, like on this journey of like uh like bulking and cutting or whatever, especially like on the cutting stages where you get really lean and shredded, it's going to happen where like you start getting validated, and it's like, especially if it's your first time, it's going to be like something you've never experienced. And again, I'm not trying to brag, I'm just trying to whatever how to yeah. But if your goal is to reach that final level of physique, you've got to be able to detach from that and be able to say, okay, yeah, this might suck a little bit, but I'm going to have to go back to bulking again. And even if I don't feel as validated, that's just going to be how it is. Now, this is what I did. And like the reason why I felt like so anxious and like kind of wanted to isolate myself, because I was like, okay, well, if I just isolate myself and I'm not around people, then I won't have to deal with feeling like I'm not being validated. But that was the wrong move. Now that I realize it, I realize now that, yeah, it just wasn't the right move. And what I should have done instead, and kind of the lesson I wanted to like give here, is that when you're like feeling these difficult emotions, whether it's fear or anxiousness, or, you're just not feeling good or whatnot, I think what a lot of guys do, especially like, growing up during childhood, especially if you've had like a traumatic experience, like someone very close to you died, or maybe you've been abused, or, some very heavy emotional experience that you just haven't fully gotten to process. What a lot of, especially I think guys do, is we try to just ignore it or suppress it, push it down, say like, oh, like, well, I don't even really care, or, this doesn't really affect me, and try to move on, try to move past it. Because to be honest, it's a lot easier, and we're kind of conditioned, like ever since like being kids, like to do that. Like say you're really angry, or you're really angry at someone, and you want to like fight this kid, right? What your teacher will say, or what your parents might say is like, "Oh, don't do that. You shouldn't like do that. You shouldn't like feel angry or whatever." Or say like you just got whooped, and you're crying, or whatever, and you're like, and your parents are like, "Oh, don't cry. You shouldn't be crying." Or just experiences like that where you feel this like bad emotion, and instead of just accepting it, what we're conditioned to do is just push it down, try to ignore it, be like, no, this is a bad emotion. I don't want to feel this, and try to distract ourselves with doing something else. I think this is actually a big reason as to why a lot of people are addicted to things like social media, video games, and drugs, and just a whole lot of these things, because we feel these negative emotions, and instead of wanting to deal with them, or like face them head on, we want to distract ourselves by just doing these other activities to distract ourselves from the emotion. What I found has helped me a lot, not only, or essentially just like facing these negative emotions, is instead just imagine yourself like, imagine a younger self, or your younger self, like when you're like a little kid, and essentially he's saying, oh, I feel this way right now, like, oh, I feel scared, or oh, I feel anxious about this. you know if some kid were to like say that to you, your instinctual reaction might be, oh, don't worry, this is going to be fine, or oh, you shouldn't feel that way, it's going to be okay. And we try to like, even if we're not intentionally trying to do it, we're trying to push away those uncomfortable emotions, like, oh, you shouldn't feel sad right now, or you shouldn't feel scared, it's going to be okay, don't worry about it. And what that's actually doing is it's invalidating those emotions and just pushing them to the side. And you can think of it kind of as like physical pain if you want to. Like, say you got a shoulder injury and you're experiencing this pain, you could shrug it off and, just wait for it to go away. But if it's actually something serious, and, you keep ignoring it, and that pain grows bigger and bigger and bigger, even if you try to suppress it, that pain is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's not going to go away until you actually address it. And it's the same thing with those negative emotions. What you have to do is actually like acknowledge it, acknowledge and like essentially validate those emotions. It doesn't mean being like a sissy and being like, oh, I feel this way, so I'm just gonna, indulge and like do all this stuff that I probably shouldn't do. No, it's just acknowledging and admitting, hey, I do feel this way, and that's okay. Whenever you feel, say, scared or anxious, you could just imagine like whatever that thought is. Just imagine like a little kid version of yourself, and he's saying, "Oh, I'm scared of this," or "Oh, I'm scared that when I start going back on a bulk, people won't like me as much, or I won't feel as validated." Instead of being like, "Oh, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal," just be like, "Oh, yeah, that must be pretty scary, or that must be pretty uncomfortable to deal with." And just by acknowledging that emotion, it helps a lot in a weird way just to deal with it, because you're not trying to push it off and ignore it. Like, now subconsciously, or like some part of your brain, like, it understands that you've actually acknowledged what's going on, and now it doesn't have to keep fighting for your awareness for you to actually acknowledge it. It's like, okay, now you've actually acknowledged it, now we can move forward. And I think what I heard, I've definitely heard advice like this before, where it's like, oh yeah, you should you know just acknowledge your emotions, and like, I guess it might be my personality, but I'm like, bro, I'm not gonna do that. That sounds really gay. But obviously, no offense if you're gay. No, I don't care. It's just like, I'm not gay, so Anyway, I just thought that it didn't apply to me, I suppose. But now I realize that it's actually a very useful tool to just acknowledge those quote unquote negative emotions that you feel and not try to push them away, because every time that you do this, and I mean there's so many examples, like even when it like comes to nofap, like when you feel lustful and you want to watch porn, but say you successfully like fend it off by like you distract yourself by doing something else, and you like keep trying to like come up with distractions, like no I'm not gonna do this, no I'm not gonna do this. If you don't acknowledge it and like pretend that you don't feel that, it kind of just like doesn't go away, it like keeps creeping up on you. So it's like the best strategy to go about this. And obviously this video isn't about nofap, it's about like your bulking journey or whatever, but the point is like it applies to so many different things. You just got to acknowledge the thing that you're feeling, and it doesn't mean giving into it, it doesn't mean that you have to be all like sissy and whiny about it. It's just acknowledging like, yeah, I feel this. Like, yeah, I feel pretty insecure when I'm on a bulk, and I feel a lot more chubby, and I don't think that I'm getting a lot of the validation that I want. Or yeah, it feels uncomfortable recording videos where I'm like sharing things about my life where other people can see, and like, yeah, that feels scary. But instead of trying to ignore that and like push that away, and then my like brain starts like fighting me, like and like making the emotion more intense, just like, yeah, I do feel that, and just leave it at that. And now I can actually move forward in spite of that, instead of like trying to ignore it. I hope what you get from this video is that you just, the next time you feel anxious or bad about something, I tried to make this video about like bulking and like being lean, because like that's a part where it really hit home, but it really translates to a lot of different areas of life, or a lot of different parts of life where like you feel these quote unquote negative emotions. You've just got to accept them. Don't try and push them down. It doesn't make you weak for doing this. It's so weird that I'm saying this, because I know if I would have heard someone say this a while ago, I'd be like, yeah, whatever, sissy. But it's actually true, and it actually works quite well. Just acknowledge the things that you feel. And again, you don't have to be weak about it. You can still remain stoic. Just don't try to ignore it, because when you ignore the pain, especially like the emotional pain, it just grows bigger and bigger until it becomes intolerable. So yeah, acknowledge the things that you feel. Um, Stop trying to like push it down and like escape it. Just acknowledge it, and you'll be good. Feel like I'm rambling at this point, but hope you got some value from this video. Leave a like or subscribe if you want to. Peace out.